As I mentioned earlier, tonight we have the privilege of having missionary Matt Johnston and his wife Johanna and their family here in town to come and minister to us and just encourage us with what the Lord is doing in their ministry in Genoa, Italy. The Johnstons are dear friends of ours, dear friends of the Marchies. We had the privilege, Brian and I did, of going to seminary with Matt, and wonderful times together. A lot of laughs, but just always appreciated the giftings that the Lord had given to Matt. Very gifted expositor, very gifted shepherd, and uniquely gifted as well in just language acquisition. He always loved the languages. He was one of the rare students that actually did. But it always just came naturally to him. And so I remember going through the missions class with him, and all of us are wrestling with where God was calling us in ministry and just kind of working through that. And it was just kind of neat to see how the Lord just put a unique burden on his heart to go and to pursue full-time missions. And I think, again, the Lord just uniquely gifted Matt for that, because he crossed that culture. Within a few years, he had learned the language of Italian from scratch and became fluent, and now preaches in Italian, ministers in Italian, and their kids are immersed in the Italian culture. They're bilingual, speaking English and Italian, but it's just really neat to see just within a few years of just their faithfulness of evangelizing and sharing the gospel, seeing what the Lord's done and birthing a church there, and just seeing what the Lord's doing, again, in a country that's entrenched in Roman Catholicism with very little gospel light, to know that there's a faithful church over there and that there's faithful Bible preaching and faithful shepherding and faithful discipleship and faithful leadership training taking place. So very encouraged. I know I was extremely encouraged just as we spent time with them this afternoon, just getting updates, and I trust that it'll be a great encouragement to your heart tonight. There's obviously limited time tonight. We talked about having him share an update, talked about having him preach, but I don't think there's really going to be time for him to do both adequately. So I think we landed on him just kind of giving an update on his ministry. One, just for those of you who know him, I think it'll be a great encouragement to you just to hear what the Lord is doing from when he's been here previously to what he's doing now in their ministry. And for those of you who don't know them, maybe this is the first time you're being introduced to them in their ministry. I think it'll be a great introduction to them in their ministry and a great encouragement to you as well, just to hear about what the Lord's doing to build his church, again, not just locally, but globally. And then we'll save some time at the end for questions. So if you have questions as he's going through just the update on his ministry, jot them down, and we'll give you time at the end there. You can ask any questions you have about their ministry, or how you can be praying for them, or burdens they have, or just questions you have about missions in general. So I think it'll be an edifying time. I know that I'm looking forward to it, and I trust that you are as well. So come and minister to us, Matt.
Good evening to you. I just want to begin by saying, for me, it is an immense privilege to be with you tonight. This church has been an encouragement to my family and I from the earliest days. So we've been in Italy now, and it seems still crazy to say so, 5.5 years. And I knew some of you even before we went to the field. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your encouragement. We spent some time with the Marchies and the Stanczyks this afternoon, and I was saying to them, one of the things that we love the most about coming home, I love to talk about Italy. And if I get you in a corner, I'm going to try to talk to you about Italy, and you're going to have to escape. And I love talking about what the Lord's doing in Italy. But I think maybe a close second would be hearing about what the Lord's doing in all of these different ministries. So we kind of get, a snapshot every few years. I'm not here every week seeing what's happening. We haven't been here, I want to say 3-ish years. So 3 years later, we come back, and there's all sorts of new people that we don't know. And I think I love seeing people that I don't know and meeting them for the first time, hearing testimonies for them about what the Lord's doing in your midst. Because we come here and see the power of God's word working among you, and it just fills us up. It just encourages us. It energizes us. It sends us back longing to see the Lord do the same in Italy. And so I want to give you really briefly 2 quick thoughts to kind of hang your thoughts on or help you navigate what we're about to do. I mean, missionary presentations are kind of interesting. There's going to be a lot of stories. I don't even know which stories are going to be told, but hopefully they'll be interesting stories. Who does know? That's a good question. But I think as you're kind of listening, I think I've asked myself in the past, as I've heard missionary presentations, okay, what do I do with this? I would love if you prayed for us, and obviously, and I know that you are, and so that would be one obvious takeaway. But I wonder if sometimes there's a bit of that, okay, missionaries are out there, they're doing something that really doesn't connect with what we're doing here, And I think one of my burdens is to kind of brush that away and offer what I think is a better proposal. So what I would say is that what you're doing here, and by what you're doing I mean church life and evangelism, loving Christ, trying to love him more, and trying to share that love of Christ with other people, we're doing the exact same thing there. I mean, obviously the food is better, but other than that, I mean, it's very similar. But I think that we should be resonating with each other, right? So I don't come back and I'm like, man, the Lord's doing something here that has nothing to do with what I'm doing there. I would argue, actually, that he's doing the exact same thing, different context, but this is the glory of Christianity. It's not tied to one culture, it transcends culture. So the Word of God transforms someone in Plantation the same way it transforms someone in Genoa. And that's incredible. The other thing that I think that we have to say at the beginning, when you, and you're going to really get this the more that I talk, what we talk about, what happens in a ministry presentation is that you're going to see that the Lord can use someone even like us. And I think that you should respond kind of this way. If the Lord can use this family, man, I can reach out to my neighbors. I can share the gospel with my neighbors. And if he can use these people, I mean, he can probably use anyone. And I think that the Lord shows his greatness not by having perfectly prepared and gifted individuals, albeit gifting and preparation is important. He's always working in spite of our weakness. And so I think that would be my desire, is that you would see some of that. There will be no sermon, but I wanted to, and yes, I'm reading the Bible from my phone. It's kind of probably a no-no, but I always forget my English Bible, and tonight is no different. You're going to notice during the presentation there's several things that I forgot. But if you look at Mark 4 for literally 2 seconds, and this is that point when the preacher opens up a text and you say, hey, I thought there was no sermon, and now you're going to be tempted to give a sermon. I will say, if I were to preach, I probably would have picked this text. This is not going to become a mini sermon. Again, this is just to set the tone for what's about to be said. Mark 4, I know that you studied it in this church. How long ago was that, Matt? A year and a half ago. So I know you guys got that locked in from a year and a half ago. But Mark chapter 4, it's a section where Jesus is preaching on the kingdom. He's talking about the mystery of the kingdom. And as much as I would love to talk about what that is, we're not. We're going to look at verse 26 super quick. You remember this. It's a really memorable story that we find in Mark's gospel. And he says this, Mark 4:26. And he said, the kingdom of God is as if a man should scatter seed on the ground. And he sleeps and rises night and day, and the seed sprouts and grows. He knows not how. The earth produces by itself first the blade, then the ear, then the full grain in the ear. But when the grain is ripe, at once he puts in the sickle, because the harvest has come. If I were to preach a sermon, and this is not a sermon, the point that I would make about this text would be that the growth of the kingdom is not limited by our limitations. Let's just say something 2 seconds about that phrase where he says, at the end of 27, he knows not how. And Jesus wants us to get the contrast, right? I mean, there's all these things happening. You have a guy, he wakes up, he goes to sleep, and there's this cyclical thing happening. Meanwhile, out in the field, there's growth. The seed that he's not there to sort of coax it into growing. It's happening while he's sleeping. Now, this is certainly not a text that says, hey, don't get out there and do something. He sows. The sowing is happening. But, and this is the point, and then enough mini sermon, the point is that the growth that happens cannot be explained thanks to the farmer or to something he knows or does. The text says just the opposite. You can't explain the growth based upon who the farmer is or what he's done. And I think as we talk about what the Lord is doing in Genoa, you're going to see just that. That the Lord has chosen to save and begin to shape a church. And I hope that that's an encouragement to you. And again, I hope that when you see the way that the Lord has blessed our meager efforts, it sort of stirs up within you a desire to say, I want to do the same. I want to sow that same seed. And I know that you are. So I hope that encourages you even in the ways that you're serving now. We're going to look at some slides. You guys want to see pictures, right? So I would say the primary thing that we do is church planting. There's other things that we do, but the primary thing that we do is church planting, local church ministry. This is a picture, as you can see, really terribly ugly place. This is a picture of an ancient fishing village right outside the city. We're going to go on. Brian, if you go to the next slide. If you would like to, I noticed that you guys have our newsletter in the back, and that's really encouraging. I appreciate you guys posting those things up. But if you would like to receive it directly to your phone or to wherever, this is my email. You can just email me and say, I would like to be on the newsletter. If you want to jot the email down, hear the presentation first, decide if you want to receive that, that's fine too. See how it goes, and if it goes okay, then you could receive the prayer letter. You could just be encouraged. My wife usually writes it, so there you go. Okay, so I'm going to leave that one more second. So it's mjohnston@luke'sevangelica.com. I think that's good. Okay. This is good. I said I forgot a few things. My English Bible, the second thing I forgot are the prayer cards. Now, this, if I did indeed bring the prayer cards, the picture that you would have seen on the prayer card is this picture. And so I'm showing you this picture so that next week, when somehow we get the prayer cards down here, that you will say, oh, I've seen that picture. This is the picture. That's my family. I mean, if not just to have the picture of my children, I mean, then on the back there's information, again, that same email. So we'd love for you guys to pray for us. I would love to say, hey, grab a prayer card on the back. I mean, that's usually how it works, but there are no prayer cards. But now you know for next time, unless we forget for next week, but I don't think that we will. But this is it, okay? So this is my family again. That's my wife, Johanna. Alice is the oldest and the tallest. In the orange jacket, there's Noel, and there's little Robbie there in the blue coat. So this is just right above our house. I want to give you, at the beginning, what are we doing? Where are we going? That's a good question. I want to give you a taste of where we live in Genoa, Italy. And Genoa is cool because when people go to Italy, it's not probably even on the top 10 list. Has anyone been to Italy before? Okay, right? I mean, so you go to Rome, into Florence, into Venice, maybe even Naples. Genoa is not usually top 10. But I want to give you a taste of what it's like. This is, again, the view over right near our apartment. And one of the things I want you to walk away with as you see all these pictures of Genoa is that it's a massively dense city. It's a city that has sort of developed and evolved in a sort of layered fashion. There's these different levels as it builds up the sides of the hills. And I think as you walk around, you look up and you see a ton of apartments. There's apartments all around you, and I think it gives you a taste, an idea of just how many people there are there. And I'll say more about that in a minute. If you go to the next slide, these are our teammates. Just like your church has the privilege to be shepherded by a plurality of elders, and then two pastors, Matt and Brian, I work with a guy named Massimo. So he's Italian-American. You can just look at the guy. He looks very Italian. His wife is not Italian. She does not look Italian. But we are so grateful for Massimo and Susanna. And we decided to go to Genoa together. So they were in Italy. We were in Italy. We teamed up. And I don't have time to tell you how big of a blessing and benefit working, co-laboring with them has been. Okay, so that's part of our team. If you go to the next slide, there we are together. This was before we got to Genoa, right? So this is when I had no gray hair, and now I have some gray hair. So there I had 0 wisdoms. Now I have, I think, 6. And so, but you can see there's my family. They have young kids as well. And so again, in the Lord's providence, He sends us with this family. It creates, opportunities for our kids to hang out with their children. We do some children's outreaches, which I'll tell you about. But the great thing is when you already have, they have 4 kids, we have 3. You already have, that's like a mini VBS right there. Okay, so I just wanted to give you, so that's really important. These are the people that we work with. Now, a bigger idea about the city. So Genoa has 2 nicknames. I'm going to teach them both to you. You'll probably forget them. That's okay. The first one is, and this is not what it says there, La Lanterna. And lanterna means light, right? Like a lantern, okay? And so that's what they call the lighthouse. Okay, so sometimes the city is just called La Lanterna because the lighthouse represents Genoa. Here, La Superba, anybody know what Superba means? Almost always in Italian, it has a negative connotation, right? Like superb in the sense of like haughty, proud. So Genoa is known, if you go to the next slide, I was talking to Brian about this. This is a quote from Petrarch, okay, it's from 1358. I know that this is going to be the high point of the whole thing. This is what people want to hear. People want quotes from Petrarch, and I'll bring it to you tonight. This is what he says. So this is the first time Genoa was called La Superba. Obviously, we're going with the translation, but this is what he writes. He writes, by the way, he is a humanist and a poet, if you care. Here's what he writes. He says, "You will see a royal city perched on the back of an alpine hill, proud because of her men and her walls, whose very appearance suggests it to be the lady of the sea." Now, I said that the top 10 tourist destinations, Genoa does not make the cut, but Middle Ages, even early Middle Ages, they are a maritime power, right? In the Mediterranean Sea, the Republic of Genoa is massively important. Without diving into much of history, you can think of things like the Crusades. Where do they get the ships and things for the Crusades? From Genoa. We'll say more about that in a minute. There you go, Petrarch, be warmed and be filled. We'll go to the next slide, please. Just to orient you, because I think maps are important. Missionaries like maps, so you have to have a lot of maps. Here's the first map, and if you see that kind of grayed in section, topped up there, do I need to jump up and point? We good? I feel like we got it, right? That is the region where Genoa is located. It's called Liguria, okay? And that in the very kind of crease, you'll see if you go to the next slide. There you go. There's a smaller picture. Genoa is right in the middle. So Genoa is the capital of this region. This is what missionaries say, but I do think it's true. This is one of the least reached regions in Italy. Well, you can almost say that for any region, but I think there's a unique need in Liguria. If you go to the next slide, this is a short video that I think it's going to work. That's going to give you a taste of what the city is like. And as you're watching the video, if you're thinking, there's no way that you filmed that's way too good, you're right. I just found it on YouTube. But I really do think it gives you, it's 2 minutes. We're going to do this. And if you would start that, please. Oops. So that's the center of the city. Piazza dei Ferrari. Church. That's Piazza. That's the main building back on the side of the church. I think that's well. That's down by that's the new port area. Last one I've been able to do some evangelism down there. All right. That's actually not Genoa. I don't know quite how I got in there. There's no beaches that look like that in Genoa. That's just, so if that was your favorite part, that is not a thing. This again is that on the edge of the city, the fishing village, and you can see kind of just keeps going. We're close now. Okay, thanks, Brian. Let's go to the next one. So just a few more, just to give you an idea what the city is like. This is the city center. In Genoa, there is the oldest historic city center in Europe, and it's massive. And what is that like? Well, when you're walking around in the historic city center, the buildings they're medieval buildings, and they almost touch. We actually looked at an apartment there. We were thinking, man, maybe we'll get an apartment there. So 5th floor, no elevator, made 500 years ago. And I never have a problem with heights. Standing inside of the building, my stomach was turning because those old floors are not level. So it's all ancient, old, no elevators, mostly no elevators. You can go to the next slide. There you go. There's another shot. You can keep going. City center again. There's my daughter. And one of the big things about living in Genoa is that there are steps everywhere. To get to these different levels, you have to scale these steps. And we're really grateful that this is over now. But we had one daughter who went to school, like let's say up here, and then another daughter went to school like over here. And so every day we kind of did this loop. And this is some of the stairs that were involved. There actually is an elevator, and if you pay 90 cents, you can ride the elevator. And confession, there were a lot of mornings when I said, I think I'm just going to take the elevator. But there you go. Steps, my daughter, what's in her hand? What's in your hand, Dallas? Pizza? Okay, let's go to the next one. This is, again, the downtown area. Go to the next one. Okay, another taste. Now we're just getting excessive with the pictures. You go to the next one. Okay, Piazza di Ferrari again. Okay. Oh, this doesn't have anything to do with anything, but I figure you want at least one picture of food. So we're going to play a two-second guessing game on what is this dish. Risotto, it is. Okay. Who said risotto? I'm going to give you points for that. You don't win anything, but if you did, you would win. What kind? That's the big question. We got the risotto, so we just got to know what kind. No. So this is risotto con rane. Who knows what that is? Frogs. So the reason that I included this is I went to teach, so I had the privilege of teaching as a part of there's a theological academy in Italy, and some of the classes take place in Mantova, and this is a delicacy in Mantova. The risotto is awesome. Usually you eat it with sausage, but they also make it with frog. Now, the crazy thing is, there's frog meat mixed in, but if you notice the form of this right here, that is a baby frog that's fried that you eat entirely. You eat the whole thing. And the bones are in. I'm just going to lay it out there. The bones are in. There you go. Next slide. That was just like a little intermission. Okay. Again, we want you to kind of have an idea of what it's like where we live. This is our apartment. Where the arrow is. And so before you saw the girls, where there was a picture of them above that. Now you can see that's our door right there. And that's where we hang our laundry. So that's good. About the city. So again, there's 600,000 people that live in Genoa. In that little strip that I showed you, there's 1.5 million people. It's the sixth largest city, largest seaport, and again, to give you a geographic orientation, we're talking 2 hours from France, 4 hours from Switzerland. Go to the next slide. Interesting tidbit, average age is 47, 5 years older than the average in Italy, so we've had the opportunity to minister to a lot of seniors. I mean, you're able to share the gospel with people who are in their 80s, people who are going to face the Lord soon. And so how will that take shape as we move forward? We don't know. The Lord's already given us these evangelistic opportunities, but we know that we want to minister to the people who are there. And since there is this older population, that's going to be something that we want to find a way to take advantage of so we can serve these people. Interesting fact, Christopher Columbus was born in Genoa. That's like their claim to fame. If you come visit, and you all are invited to come visit, what I always say is, if you can pay your plane ticket, we'll let you stay with us. We cannot pay for your plane ticket, but if you do come, you can come see his house. We already said largest historical center. Interesting, the Genovese are known for being cheap. They have a saying in Italian, it has to do with having a short arm, because it can't get in the pocket to get the money out. And they're known for being closed. And so everyone before we moved, so we were in Rome for 2 years before we came to Genoa. We've been in Genoa for 3.5 years. And before we got there, everyone said to us, you're gonna find that the Genovese are closed. We have, by God's grace, we've seen a little bit of that, but mostly we've seen people who are eager to meet us. And this is kind of the unique thing that the Lord does in sending an American family to Italy. People want to know, what are you doing here? Who are you? Why are you here? And so the Lord has already given us several friendships with people, even in our apartment building. And so that's been a big encouragement. You can go to the next one. Why Genoa? And this is an important question. 3 things. And you're going to see these little icons that really have almost nothing to do with what there is, but I just like them. Okay. So first of all, extremely limited evangelical testimony. And I think that's one of the unique things, that it's not even that I'm just saying there is an extremely limited number of churches that preach the Bible well. I'm talking about there's very few evangelical churches at all. The largest church, which it seems to be a completely liberal church that works with Roman Catholics, that confuses the gospel, has 100 people. That's the biggest by far. If you have 50 people in your church in Italy, that's huge. You have a large church. It's not odd for me to meet someone and say, hey, tell me about your church, and there might be 10 people. That's normal. And that's very much our reality. So I wanted to go, and my burden was, Matt and I sat there in that class, I think it was first semester missions class. And we're all just, like Matt said, asking, where's the Lord going to send us? It was there that I, for the first time, heard a question phrased this way. You don't ask yourself, why should I go, but why shouldn't I go? That gets the wheels moving for me. And so my burden was to take what I had experienced at Grace Emmanuel, where we went to seminary, the Expositor Seminary, to a place that did not have those things. And the 3 things that I usually think about are careful handling of God's word, expositional preaching, vibrant body life, and training of men. Now, there's other things, but I think that those are the things that I had on my mind. And so I wanted to find a place in Italy where I could take these things. At the beginning, listen, I'll be honest with you. Maybe you've seen this presentation to this point, and you're thinking, Italy, I mean, really? Like, is this where we need to send people? I was in the same boat. I actually thought that if you wanted to be a rough and tumble, what I would have called a real missionary, you go to Asia. I mean, I would have said that Italy is frankly for wimps. I didn't know anything about it. I just kind of assumed. What you find out, though, if you do a little bit of reading, I don't know if you've ever seen the book Operation World. Has a list of all the countries. You go and find the country, and it gives you all sorts of stats about that country, 2 to 3 pages, really great resource. If you go and read about Italy, you'll find that there are less than 1% of the entire population, 60 million people, of whom are born-again believers. And I think that those stats are probably inflated. So you're talking about a small, minuscule portion of 60 million people. The need is massive. So in one sense, you could pick a city anywhere in Italy. If the Lord today laid it upon a missionary's heart, I want to go to Italy, I want to go somewhere where there's nothing happening, you could really pick almost anywhere, and it would be a good, God-honoring choice. Italy needs more missionaries. So that was a little side note. I was looking for, I didn't want to, since that's the case, I did not want to set up on another missionary's back doorstep. That's why I picked Genoa. And sadly, because until you move somewhere in Italy, the churches don't have really nice websites. It's hard to figure out exactly what's happening. I thought that the need was great, but since I've been there, the need has been even greater than I imagined. It's a strategic location, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but it's well connected, and I think it offers opportunities to reach other places from Genoa as a strategic starting point. Then there's a guy, I don't know what the arms are doing, but there's a subjective element. Because I think the thing that comes down to it, why did I pick Genoa? I like Genoa. I wanted to go to Genoa. That was confirmed by my elders, by other wise men. But again, when there's so many choices, good choices where there's needs, I think the subjective element plays a part. So go to the next slide. Okay, la nostra speranza, our hope. What's our hope? What are we trying to do? Go to the next slide. This is a really wordy way to describe what we're trying to do, but I think you'll resonate with some of this. Our long-term goal in Genoa is to see Christ plant a church that is these things. And so as we've talked about what we want to do, I think it's important to say, well, what kind of a church are we planting? And it's I think especially important in a culture that's submersed in Roman Catholicism. one that is rooted in and nourished by sound Bible teaching. And I think we're talking about the centrality of the word. So we don't just mean a church that teaches the Bible. We're talking about a church that is based upon, that lives and breathes Bible. That has to be the case. Essentially, there's two options. And you see them played out being in Italy with the Roman Catholic Church. Either the scriptures are the only authority, or something else is. And for the Catholic Church, what is it? The church itself. You have to have an authority. And so that is essential to all that we're doing. Secondly, a vibrant culture of heart-level discipleship. Brian was just talking to me about the way that the church is growing, and there's people getting in each other's lives, encouraging one another, serving one another. That's exactly what we hope to see in Genoa, right? Not just people who come to hear preaching, but people who love each other, who want to serve each other, because the church itself is actually a picture of the gospel. So different people who really don't have, maybe in some sense, a lot in common, the Lord saves each of them despite themselves, not thanks to their works, but because of the grace of Christ. He throws them together in a church, and then those people serve each other. And the church then becomes the evidence of the gospel. It kind of works like this. If I say to a friend, well, Jesus has changed my life. He says, well, how do you know? Part of the answer should be, come to my church and you'll see people who are imperfect, but that serve one another. So this is our hope. And then a robust ecclesiology. The doctrine of the church, what the church is all about. I know Matt's doing a series on the church. He told me it's a very short series. Kidding, he told me it was going to be 10 months. That's what I love about Matt. He doesn't do a 4-week series in the church. He does a 10-month series in the church. I do like a 2 weeks. He does the 10. I mean, you got to love it. And I think that, and again, I keep making this connection. I think it's an important one. He's trying to pour the same things into you that we're trying to lay the foundation for there, of a careful idea of what the church is. We could say, in summary, the people that go to the church and are a part of it should know why they're coming and what they're doing. That's an important part about being a Christian. Christians are people who think. We are people of a book, which means you have to think about what that book says. And an important question in the Christian life is, why am I doing what I'm doing? Right? Why am I here? And so from the beginning, we want our people to be able to get that. A distinctive commitment to leadership training. We want to see other leaders raised up. And then, this is the big thing, a church that labors to see other churches planted. This is kind of the big goal. What's our hope? That's our hope, that there would be churches planted from this church. If you go to the next one. Here it is. We're in the city center. That's that top point. Strategic place to start. And the hope is that there would be churches planted in various zones in the city. There's different neighborhoods. And that from there, we would be able to plant churches in other cities. We're always in the same little strip. And that these strategic churches could reach into places where I don't think anyone's ever gone. I mean, I meet people often, and I say, have you ever met a Protestant before? They say, no, you're the first. It's heavy. There's these villages up in the hills. I can't imagine anyone has ever preached the gospel to those people. And I can't go individually to every house, but if the Lord lets us plant these churches in strategic places, that's going to be the way to reach these places in the hills. So if you go to the next slide, Brian. Another map. I know you're waiting. We live in the mint green where it says Centro Est. There's 90,000 people just in the city center. I mean, 90,000. How many people are in Plantation? A lot, right? Anybody? Plantation population? The Google's going to happen. We got to do it. But this, I just want you to kind of get the idea, right? So you could easily have multiple churches in the city center. We're in the city center. That's where our church is. But then from there, maybe if the Lord's saving people from that little purple, there's 60,000 people just concentrated in that little area right there. You get the idea. The opportunity is massive. And when I talk about what our hope is, I pick hope on purpose because this is not like a 10-year plan that, hey, I know in 10 years I'm going to come back and I'm going to say to you, I've planted 10 churches and that's what I'm going to promise you. I don't know that. The Lord doesn't have to save anyone. He'll save as he wills. The Lord knows how best to glorify himself. And we plan and say, If the Lord wills, we'll do this or that. But this is our hope. This is what we're praying for. And I'm telling you this because I want you to pray the same way. And I think that you can pray in a more informed fashion, even to be able to say, Lord, I remember that guy was going on and on. There was maps. Plant that church in the city center, root it in the city, and then move over to the next neighborhoods. Pray that way. Go to the next slide. For example, so Genoa, again, we're right in the middle with that blue dot. If you go to the left, Savona is another city. In that city, there's 60,000 people, the third largest city in the region. Already from there are 6 people that come from there to go to our church. That's an hour drive. So, and you want to talk about how desperate people are for the word? They're driving an hour to hear a guy preaching his second language. I mean, it's the hunger's immense. We have a guy that drives an hour and 15 minutes because there's nothing. And I don't just mean there's like, I kind of prefer, like this guy likes John Piper, this guy likes John MacArthur. I mean, nothing. So you could pray for Savona. Maybe that would be the next step. Please go on, Brian. Thank you. Our church. So we began in my living room, and now we have membership. We've done the Lord's Supper, and we've begun to, I would say that now we are a duly constituted New Testament church. Interesting question. When do you go from being a Bible study to being a church? We have elders. We preach the word. We have membership, and we're hoping to baptize our first person. I'll tell you about that. And now we celebrate the Lord's Supper together. Ordinances, preaching of the word, membership, church discipline. We have those things. We're small. We're just a few people. But I would say by God's grace, we are now a duly constituted New Testament church. At this point, and by the way, this is, remember I told you that the city is also called La Lanterna, the lantern. This is where we get our logo from our church. Okay? I designed that myself. No, I didn't. But the church is called Lux Evangelica, and this is Latin for gospel light, okay? The church right now is almost all, save one person, people who were searching for something like what we're doing. So real quick example, actually, you know what? I'll tell you about it when we show pictures of them. You go to the next slide, please, Brian. What is the Lord doing? Well, we've already talked about the body life. The Lord has, in his kindness to us, given the ability to purchase a building. This was so unexpected and so massively encouraging. I think it's about time for a story. The owner, we knew he was going to try to sell the building, so we put all this money into the building because we got a great deal on the rent. In Italy, you rent a building and you sign a contract for 6 years, but you can renew for 6 more years. Kind of a weird way they do it there, but that's how it works. So we knew, hey, we have this place for 12 years. Put a lot of money in it, get it ready, transfer. It was actually flooded. It was in a flood zone. The thing was destroyed. The basement was a pool, nightmare. Sat there dormant, nothing, 2 years. We come in, we redid it because the owner cut us a killer deal on the rent. So we're in there, great deal on the rent, thanking the Lord, doing ministry. Upstairs, kind of worship center. Downstairs, chairs, kitchen. I know this sounds like a huge, massive facility. The worship center holds 70 people, and 70 people would be really tight, just to kind of give you an idea. I'm down there working, and I know he's trying to sell it, but I'm thinking this thing's never going to sell, and even if he does, they can't kick us out. It so happened that another church decided they were going to try to buy the building. I'm there, I'm working. I let the real estate agent in. I'm working downstairs. They're talking upstairs. I don't know if I'm supposed to be listening, but I'm definitely listening. And what I'm hearing is, this is going to be awesome for our church. We're going to put the drums here. I can't wait till we get this rolling. And so I kind of pulled the guy aside and said, hey, listen, this is who I am. Tell me who you are. Man, I understand it is for sale, but are you going to make an offer on this? He's like, oh, definitely. I'm thinking, oh, man, that's a bummer. And by the way, the ministry is not sound. I mean, it was not like, man, hey, at least it's another church that's going to teach the word. It was not like that, unfortunately. That started all sorts of discussions. The goal was we want to get enough to have a mortgage. That'll be the way to go. In the Lord's providence, we were able to raise all of the money. I think you guys maybe have followed this in some of the newsletters. And have extra money to redo one other little part of the building. And you might think, we're talking about buildings. Like, let's talk about, like spiritual stuff. Well, think about this. Saints gave so that that can happen, right? Because they love Christ. Now others who love Christ can gather together to worship him. You might say, well, can't they do it at their houses? Well, they can. But this gives us a sort of focal point, a touch point, a home base for all that we're doing in Genoa. And we want to communicate longevity. I don't want to communicate, hey, I'm here, hey, here's the gospel, I can leave tomorrow. No, we are here. We talked all about this, vibrant, robust ecclesiology, all of those things. You need time for that to happen. We're committed to being there. And now that the church does not have to pay a mortgage or rent, they're going to be in a great position one day to pay a pastor. And you might think, well, that doesn't seem like that cool of a thing. I mean, why is that special? In Italy, there's hardly any pastors that are paid by their people. It's really complicated, bivocational. And you have to thank the Lord for men like that wake up early to study, and I know some of them. I'm grateful for them. But I think long term, if we want to see healthy churches in Italy, we have to see people supporting their pastors. You see it all over the New Testament. So in the Lord's providence, now we're set up where the giving can go directly into a fund, 50% of which will go towards supporting a future pastor. And so we're already thinking about how that might happen. So we got the building. We are studying the Gospel of Mark. I know that you guys studied the Gospel of Mark and finished not too long ago. Again, that connection I was saying, we're doing some of the same things. We've made it to chapter 9. Recently, we've seen a lot of new faces. There is, for example, a family, and this is massive. I mean, when you have a church on Sunday where there's 15 people, when 6 new people show up and are going to start coming, I mean, I'm not a numbers guy, but that's like a big-time percentage increase, right? I mean, and you say, is it about the numbers? Well, no. I mean, obviously we're going to preach and do what we're going to do regardless of who comes or doesn't come. And I think that the Lord has really given us joy in sharing the gospel no matter what the response is. And I think that's a key thing for missionaries. I think it's a key thing also for all of us, that it is a privilege just to speak of Christ to someone else. Yes, I'm praying that the Lord use that to convert someone. That's my heart's desire. But just evangelism in and of itself is a blessing. Just hearing the word in and of itself is a blessing. So you're right, the numbers are not the thing that's most important. But I want as many people as possible to be exposed to the truth. Family comes, mom, dad, 3 children. How many does that make? 5? I said 6. I can count, okay? One of whom is married. So 3 children, one of whom is married. And I bring them up because it's been a massive encouragement them coming. There's a newly married couple. We're doing premarital for the first time, translating stuff, getting it ready for them. They're already married. We're doing premarital. They didn't do it before. We're doing it post-pre. You know what I mean. And this family came from the Baptist church. So in Italy, you have the Baptists, the Methodists, and the Waldensians, BMW. And they all are trained together. And the Waldensian church is the historic denomination in Italy. They've been there since, so in the 12th century, there's a guy named Peter Valdo, a Frenchman. He comes, crosses the Alps, comes into Italy, and then in the Alps valleys, and the valleys just kind of at the foothills of the Alps in Italy, they begin to form these congregations. 12th century, 13th century, they're Bible-believing. So it's the historic Protestant denomination in Italy. 16th century, Reformation comes. They accept the Reformation of the Reformed variety. Think John Calvin. So this is real Italians who have followed not Roman Catholicism, but they found a way to have this evangelical witness. Today, that church, one of the first times I go and look at the door, on the front door, there's a picture of one of their pastors shaking hands with a bishop, a Roman Catholic bishop. All 3 of these denominations now collaborate with the Catholic Church. If you have questions about Catholicism, I would love to answer those questions. I don't have time, obviously, to give a talk on Catholicism. And I'm like, oh, maybe I could do a 5-minute one. No, I'm not going to. But if you can imagine the confusion that creates. We're Protestant, but we're working openly with the Catholic Church. And I'm going to put it bluntly, if you think the Catholic Church has the true gospel, and I'm not talking about individual Catholics, could an individual Catholic get saved in spite of the teaching of the Catholic Church? Well, sure, by the power of the word, just like anybody else. But if someone follows the teaching of the Catholic Church, could they get saved? Absolutely not, just the opposite. So if you as a Protestant church are going to work with the Catholic Church, from my perspective, you may as well just hang it up. If you think that they have the gospel, then why are you even doing church? They have 1 billion people. They have trillions of dollars. What are you even doing? So where are we going with that? This family came from the Baptist church, the Italian Baptist church. Wildly liberal for many of the same reasons. It breaks my heart. I mean, you have these dear people who they see Baptist. You even have Eastern Europeans, Ukrainians, Russians. They think Baptist in the Eastern Europeans, and it's very conservative, kind of old school. They come to Italy, oh, Baptist. They go there, and it's totally liberal, totally. I mean, in the worst sense. So they've come, and it's encouraging because they've come for that reason. So they haven't come because I don't like the music or the carpet's not my favorite color. They're saying, I want to leave that church because they're not clear on the gospel. It's a pretty good reason to leave a church. So that's been a massive encouragement. And I'll tell you about this possible first baptism in a minute. Okay, you can go to the next slide, please, Brian. There you go. That arrow shows right where our church is. I'm going to stand on this side some. I feel like this side is continuing to have to stand. This brother right here is I'm just totally blocking him. He's seen nothing. I'm sorry. Let me block Matt for a minute. So that's where the church is, and I almost feel guilty telling you this. It's a 2-minute walk on foot from our apartment. Sometimes we're still not the first people there. It's kind of one of those things when it's closer, you think you have more time, but you don't. Well, that's the way that we rationalize it. But it's phenomenal. And so we're even praying that little by little, people would get saved from that area. That has not happened yet, but we've had some great outreach, which I'll tell you about in a minute. You can go to the next slide. Snowed last year, this year. Was it this year? January. This year, January, it snowed. I think it's the first time it snowed in 7 years in the city, heavy like this. Just so happens, this is the day that we flew in. Long story. We were in the States in January. Really long story. But we were flying in this. It never snows that day. We're about to land. We've been traveling. And they say, hey, we're going to either redirect you to Torino, Turin, or Bologna. And we got redirected to Bologna, which is even further away, but that's okay. There was snow. I don't think we even saw it. I think it was melted by the time we got there. So it just redirected us. But there you go. There's the church. It's basically it's a storefront, okay? That is not my motorcycle. That is a storefront. People walk by. It's just right there. Kind of one of the things that we're hoping to do is how can we use the window space? Because we don't want to be cheesy, right? But we want to be useful. When people are walking by, how can we sort of draw people in? But people walk by there constantly. What is this? Lux Evangelica, who are these people? And that's even a part of having a presence in a city for which we're so grateful. You can go to the next slide. This is us buying the building. You can see Massimo. He's overseeing everything. If you'll notice, I have no papers and no pens in front of me because I did essentially nothing. It's animated? Man, this is a good presentation. This is interesting. And so we did all this crazy paperwork. That's the owner in the green. That's Massimo, again, my colleague. He did so much work to make this happen. Buying things in Italy as an association, the number of bureaucratic hoops you have to jump through is immense. I know secondhand, not firsthand, for which I'm grateful. But this is all a part of laying the foundation for what we're doing. You can go to the next slide. There is just to give you a taste of, this is kind of a Sunday morning. Here's our group. This is this amount of people. If you see this amount of people, this is almost like, whew, that's a good group. I'm not kidding. This is a good group. And so there you go. So there's the, this is the main, this is the upstairs. You can go to the next slide. This is downstairs kitchen stuff. We have a meal once a month, and this is people getting stuff ready for the meal. There you go. So this is me obviously saying something very hilarious, or at least I think it's funny. But this guy, Eduardo, if I was here last time, I probably told you about him. 2 seconds on Eduardo. He was the first guy that came to our church. Day one of Bible study in Genoa. Me, Johanna, that's it. I think the kids were playing in the other room. Second week is when he came. We're there, and if I even look back on like where my Italian was, it was pretty rough. But this guy had been praying for 2 years, and we didn't know about it. He's praying for 2 years. We didn't know about it. We go to Savona, we go to Genoa. He finds out through a friend of a friend on Facebook. We connect up, and he has been committed to the church ever since. So when we're gone, at one point, we were back for a conference, and so was Massimo. And who welcomes the guest preacher and introduces and prays? Eduardo. It's incredible. In that case, we didn't even sow. We just showed up. And I think that, again, the point is, I didn't engineer that. That wasn't the plan. The Lord worked that out in his kindness. So that's Eduardo. You can go to the next slide. Here's a group. We're kind of eating. Again, there's some other people. I'm not going to walk through every person. You can go to the next slide. Here's us. A lot of the guys just come over and hang out. This is our apartment, and we are playing. What are we playing there? Some sort of Go Fish. Classic game, right? So you got Eduardo and you got Paolo. Young guys come over and hang out. Next slide. This is Paolo. I'm going to tell you about this guy. So Paolo, December, let's say 7 months ago-ish, he comes to our church, and I got to ask him what he specifically searched for, but he shows up kind of out of nowhere. And again, there's only a few people there, so it's not like he's hidden in the crowd and, hey, who's the new guy? Everybody notices him. You talk to him, and we find out that he did an internet search for something like light, truth, gospel, finds our church, comes, and he says to us, so about 20 years ago, I was a Catholic monk. Okay. He's in Rome. He's a Catholic monk. He's working with a cardinal. He reads the scriptures, and he decides, this is hypocrisy. I'm not doing this. But then for 20 years, at first I thought he had been going to other churches for 20 years, and I asked him, like, hey, so have you been on a part of, since that point, have you ever been in a church? No, not really. It's like, I just realized I need the truth. Comes, and it seems like the Lord has saved him. It has been so encouraging to see him grow in his grasp of the truth, his articulation of the truth. Because to give you an idea about Paolo, he was a monk for these 3 years, so he can quote Augustine from De Trinitate, but he didn't understand the gospel, right? So he knows all this like church history, theology, heavy stuff, but didn't understand the simplicity of the gospel. And now when you talk to him, he gets it. And there's fruit in his life. And as a kind of a side note bonus, we've been praying that he would find a job, and so the economy is terrible in Italy. And so there's guys that want to work, can't find jobs. He just got a job. This is a massive praise. So there's him at his job. There's him helping to set up. But it's been massively encouraging to see Paolo grow. And so what this means is we might need to figure out how we're going to do a baptism in our current location, which is great, right? So that would be the first baptism. We've been in Genoa for 3.5 years. That would be amazing. William Carey ministered for 7+ years before his first baptism. So I think that would be, that would be ahead of the game. You go to the next slide. We're starting to do some, and I got to keep moving because we do have questions. And so this is, we did an outreach for young people. We're starting to do that. You go to the next one. This is another outreach for young people. We're talking all about the Imago Dei, the image of God, what that means, and they're interested. Most of them are unbelievers, I would say. So they come, we're doing a Q&A, just interacting. Go to the next one. Pizza afterwards, got to do the pizza afterwards. It's essential. Next. Okay, so evangelism. We already said that evangelism flows out of the local church, but how is that happening where we are? It's a very evangelistic ministry, as you can imagine. It's the very beginning. Next slide. 3 ways. Cold turkey evangelism. Brian was telling me that I should have put a picture of a turkey there. I couldn't find it, so there's just 3 people. And Masu and I, we haven't done it for quite a while, but especially at the beginning, to get to know the city and to get to know people, we would just go out on the town squares, introduce ourselves, and say, hey, do you want to talk about spiritual things? Can I ask you some questions? And a lot of times they would say yes. And we'd chat with Catholics, we'd chat with atheists, we'd chat with all sorts of people. One time we chatted with a Gnostic, and he said, I'm a Gnostic. I thought he said agnostic, and I'm like, talking about agnosticism. He's like, no, I'm Gnostic. Think Da Vinci Code. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. But it was a great way to meet people. So that is happening. I think that we'll do that more. So, for example, recently, Massimo has been talking about taking Eduardo with him. Not a lot of fruit from that, but sometimes we would talk with people even for an hour. You're sitting there, and there's a university that has 40,000 students. Go hang out in front of the philosophy department. They're just dying to, wax eloquently about what they think they know. Great opportunity to talk about the gospel. Personal relationships is the core of what we're doing. Okay, what does that look like? Well, we have spent a lot of time with parents from our children's school. That's been a big encouragement, and I'll show you some pictures about how that kind of happens. So this could be anything. Hanging out at the end of the school year, you do all of these events, you go have pizza a bunch of times. I know it sounds terrible, right? And you meet people, and that's the way. And so we're trying to be very deliberate about meeting people. Neighbors, some of our neighbors have come to some of our events. Some people from the children's school have come to events. Just continually meeting people any way possible. And so I'm trying to find ways to meet. So personal relationship, I'd say that's the core. And then we have these outreach events, and I'm going to tell you about some of those. You can go to the next slide. Here is one of our outreach events. I don't remember what this is on. No, I think this is we did some talks on Martin Luther, and we're trying to pick things that are intriguing to people, so that they can come into the church. It's not just a church service. We can teach them about something that's important. It's truth, weaving in some biblical truth, and it kind of gives them exposure to what we're all about. So we did some talks on Luther, and I think missionaries have to find ways to connect with people. So you can't share the gospel with people you don't know. So how am I going to meet people? This is one way we've done it. I mean, people do all sorts of different stuff. I know a guy who had a soccer league. I'm terrible at soccer, so I'm not going to have a soccer league. The same guy's famous, like super musical. They join the band and do all that stuff. Totally cool. That's not my thing. So we're trying to find ways for us to meet people. So this is something we've done, a church history conference annually. We're doing one this year on Peter Martyr Vermigli. That's how you probably heard it pronounced, Vermigli. He's an Italian reformer. If you want to talk about that after, I'll talk your ear off about him. Next. We did an English class. So we offered, this is not at the church. The church is not offering English classes, but we just said, hey, as individuals, we're going to invite people over from Alice's class. So Alice just finished the 2nd grade. And said, hey, we're going to invite them over. They need to learn English. They're learning English from Italians right now. They have to learn it in school. So we're going to invite them over. So this is Johanna totally overseeing that. I pretty much just watched. You can see her. She's like really dominating right here because she's holding our son and teaching English at the same time. That's what I'm talking about. This is awesome because these people, the kids came, lots of kids came, and then afterwards the parents hung out. And I mean, it was incredible because some of these dads, Italian birthday parties work like this. There's all these kids' birthday parties. The women are over there. They're just chatting it up, doing their thing. The dads are literally in the corner, and we're all just kind of like this. No talking, silence. Then you go, hey, so, yeah, I'm Matt. Nice to meet you. So what do you do? One-word answer. Okay. Wait, okay. I mean, just you cannot get a conversation going. And I see this guy from afar all the time when I would drop Alice off. And I'm thinking, I'll probably never talk to that guy. He comes to pick up his daughter. He just wants to chat, going on and on. Hey, tell me about Protestantism. That's great. And what's the difference? I mean, it's kind of one of those things when you're thinking, that's exactly the question I want you to ask. This is great. And he's interested. So all that to say, that was really encouraging. That's kind of building on those relationships. Then kids will come to this. We'll get to know their families. We'll have the families over for dinner, hang out in the home, get to know them. I mean, we want to bear people's burdens. We want to understand them. We want to love them. We want to befriend them. I mean, our longing is that they come to know the gospel, but it can never be some sort of bait and switch. I kind of like you and I want to hang out with you just to give you the gospel. No, I think the gospel comes in a burden for our fellow image bearers. They're image bearers. They're made in God's image. They can do wonderful things, albeit marred by the fall. And so we can appreciate them. I think we can share life with them to an extent. There's always that separation. And within that, we're trying to share the gospel with them. You can go to the next slide. This is Alice's class singing songs about Genoa. And again, this is just another thing. We go to these events. She is wearing the neon yellow hat, I believe. Right? Is that true? Ali. So they sang songs about, this is like a We Love Genoa Day. And so we went and watched that. And this is Piazza Colombo. You can go to the next slide. So really quick, and then I'm going to tell you some people's names, and then we're going to do questions, because this goes till, you said 9:30. It's just kind of weird side note. I was like, man, that's like a long service, hour and a half. I don't know if I have enough to say. We've done this. So the guy that I work with, Massimo, before he was trained to be a pastor, he was an engineer. Let me go over here. So he was an engineer, and so he's really into creation research. When we would walk around and talk to people, even our friends, a thing that comes up a lot is, well, what about evolution? I don't believe in the Bible and all that stuff because I believe in evolution. Really. And so he's begun to really get into kind of Answers in Genesis, Institute for Creation Research stuff, because none of that's available in Italian. And what we've done is we've created this, it's like a kids club, Esploratori, explorers, and kids come for an hour and a half or 2 hours. We do experiments, totally cool stuff. I mean, the guy built a giraffe heart. What does that mean? All I know is it showed how the giraffe's heart pumped blood to his head. It was totally cool. He's doing all of that and then showing them from the scriptures what it means that God is a creator and beginning to connect that to different areas of their lives. So people from the schools have come. They've been interested. One of the big things when you talk to Catholic friends is they say, well, the Catholic Church doesn't really have anything for families. And so we've wanted to take advantage of that. And again, what's really great about this is that we're exposing them directly to truth in an interesting way, but we're talking about truth from the beginning. You can go to the next slide. We had a little outreach on marriage, just trying to say, hey, what does the Bible teach about marriage? You can go to the next one. This one was one that I did on the title is, How Many Gospels Are There? And so I talked about, the Gnostic Gospels. Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Judas. People are interested. A bunch of random people came. And again, what are we doing? I'm talking about the Gnostic Gospels. Then I say, and here's the difference between these Gospels and the real Gospels. Next one, we did some chats on John Calvin. Great shot of him there. Last slide. Here's some people you can pray for. And I'm gonna stop here. I'll tell you about these people if there's not questions, because we have 15 minutes, really 14, but 15-ish. But these are some people, if you're taking down names, these are people who we see regularly. And the first three are unbelievers. And the last, Stefano and Valentina, are dear friends who are hoping can continue to grow in the truth. They're believers, we're encouraged by them, but we're hoping that even our church could minister to them. Okay, so I'm going to leave that right there if people want to take that down. And those are people, again, that we see regularly. And just 2 seconds, the first one, Marino, I read the Bible. I was reading the Bible with him once a week. So these are relationships that are moving forward. Are there any questions? I know I've said a lot of stuff. Any questions about Italy, about evangelism, about anything? The frog risotto. Yes. Oh, sorry. Oh.
Hello.
Hi.
So it's really interesting hearing how you guys are doing a lot of evangelism over there. And normally you hear a lot about doing cold turkey evangelism. They're just going out there and like on their soapboxes and preaching the gospel all day long. But it's really interesting to see how you guys are doing more of like a community outreach and just trying to reach people who you're always connected with. And I think that was kind of what made the connection between how we're doing evangelism here in America versus, you guys in Genoa. But you mentioned like very, very briefly that when you did do evangelism like outside on the streets, that there wasn't much fruit that came from that. Why do you think that is?
And I should be more clear. I mean, fruit that I know of, right? And I mean fruit in a very specific sense, as in conversion. that I know of, right? I mean, I would say it's anytime, and again, to go back to what I said at the beginning, anytime that I get to bring truth to bear on someone's life, I would call that a fruitful time. I would just use the word fruit in that very specific sense of I don't know of any conversions from that. So if you said to me, hey, is anyone coming to the church as a result of that? At this point, I would say no. But I think it's fruitful for a lot of reasons. I think it's valuable. I'm not saying that it's not valuable. I just mean at this point, the Lord has not seen fit to use that to save people and then bring them to the church.
Thank you.
A great question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. But I was just curious, when you share with the Catholics over there,
Sure.
are they like the Catholics here where they say they're Catholic, but they really never go to church
Sure.
except maybe Easter and Christmas? Or are these practicing Catholics?
That's a great question. I'm going to try to like hold myself back without going on and on because I really want to say a lot about that. The answer is there's a spectrum. Okay, and when you speak with a Catholic, I think we always have to be cognizant of the sort of Catholic with whom we're speaking. The difference, like one difference would be, is that to be Italian is to be Catholic. And that's true in a lot of different ways for a lot of different people, but up to the point where, and I tell this to people a lot, I've known of people who are professed atheists, and yet their children are baptized just because that's kind of a part of the culture. Because it's just easier that way. So I think you have that phenomenon that does not quite make sense in America, but you meet all sorts of Catholics. And I think that one encouragement I would have for you is that, especially if you have relatives that are Catholics or friends that are Catholics, you have to begin to understand that there is one Roman Catholic Church that has a wide umbrella that houses a lot of different stuff that's happening. One simple example would be there are people that love Pope Francis, and there are people that think Benedict would be a million times better, the Pope before him. Interesting. There's some people that love Vatican II. So Vatican II thinks 60s. There's this huge aggiornamento, update to Catholicism, not doctrinally, but they're going to have a different tone in the way they deal with people like us, Protestants. And so Vatican II talks a lot about Bible study. It's not a thing that the Catholic Church talked a lot about before that. So you have some Catholics. Actually, this guy right here. See that third line down? Giacomo and Francesca. And I said Francesco. It should be Francesca, just for your notes. That's not good. That's his wife, Francesca, with the A. Excuse me. But Giacomo, we're having dinner, and kind of out of nowhere, we're talking a little about Protestantism, and all of a sudden he starts citing biblical references, and it's kind of like, well, you know, James says this and Paul says this, and this guy's Catholic, and I'm thinking, who is this guy? And I find out he's a part of, I think this is what it's called in English, but I don't really know, the neo-catechumens, and that's like at least the way I think it would be in English. And these people, so he's been going to a Bible study for like more than a decade. And so that's a really unique sort of Catholicism, but it's still a part of the Catholic Church. You'll talk to other people, they don't know the first thing about the Scriptures. You talk to some people, they're diehard, they know what the Catechism teaches. So my encouragement to you is you need to begin to understand that multifaceted reality. The other little help that I'll give you is, for Catholics, things that seem contradictory, they're going to argue that it's not an either or, but it's a both and. It's not just the Bible, it's the Bible and tradition. It's not just Jesus. Yes, it's Jesus is central, but there can also be Mary. There can also be the saints. There can also be the Treasury of Mary. It's a both and. And so you sort of have to begin to, so you find in Proverbs it says, answer a fool according to his folly, but then don't answer a fool according to his folly. And I think part of what he's talking about is, in an apologetic context, I need to understand where these people are coming from. Okay, so that would be a long answer to a simple question, but thank you for asking the question. It's a really good one.
We know that Italy is a Catholic country. They can be very territorial in some sense. I want to know if you have any resistance to it.
That's a great question. At this point, the resistance doesn't come formally necessarily. So it's not technically a Catholic country. So there is a separation between church and state. And notice this, right? They still teach Catholicism in the schools, but now you can opt out. So our daughter does not, she goes to public school, but she does not get the Catholicism, does not get Catholic Bible or Catholic teaching. I think we've heard stories of, and this is just kind of what we've heard from other people. We knew a lady whose parents, when she converted, didn't talk to her for, I think, decades. And so I think it's at the personal level that people experience that sort of opposition and persecution at this point. We've heard other things about churches being closed down. I haven't heard anything about that for a long time. But you might also say that we're so small that I don't think anyone feels threatened by us in the slightest. I mean, the Catholic Church certainly doesn't.
Okay, thank you. Another thing, you were saying that you struggle to connect with the Italian father, but my advice to you, you should pay more attention to the culture in the Sampdoria.
That's a good point. That is a very good point. We actually follow Sampdoria, but I think that the soccer is important. That's true. That's true. I'm trying to get into it. When I arrived in Italy, I did not even know what do you call it? Offsides? Not offsides. What do you call it in soccer? Fuori gioco. Anyways, I didn't even know how it worked in soccer, and so I was like, man, this game is silly. I don't understand what's happening. But the more I get it, it is a beautiful game. Soccer is a beautiful game. You heard it from the pulpit. It's a beautiful game. Look into it. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Please.
Why is it that there's so few evangelical churches and in the need of the gospel there as expository, or based on the slides that you showed, there's so much in need. Why is that?
That's a great question. Is your question just why are the churches so needy, or why is there a need for so many churches?
Why is that there's so many few churches like ours, trying to share the gospel there? As you know, Paul, in the missionary times, ran all over that place and left, planted churches. How come it has not boomed? Or
that's a great question. I think, and it's a hard one to answer. I think that in part, another important Italian writer once said, we are so bad and evil because we're so close to the core of Roman Catholicism. And I think that there's something to that. I mean, if you ask yourself, who were the greatest opposers of Jesus' ministry? You think scribes and Pharisees. Formalism, dead formalism. The Catholic Church has sent more people to hell that way through religious formalism, a form of a seemingly biblical something, than any other institution. It's not even close. And I'm not talking about people who deny Jesus Christ. I'm talking about people among all of the professors or people that claim to be Christian in some form. I mean, it's not even close. So to be in the country that is the sort of mothership for all of that, you don't escape from that unscathed. And I think in part, even the people that are not, totally committed Catholics, the residual, the residue of Catholicism is still it remains in the way that they think. Works righteousness. If I can just do more good than bad, the Lord's going to accept me. I mean, that is the death knell to the gospel. And our hearts love that. You know that passage in, what is it, 2 Kings 5 with Naaman? Right? He says, hey, you want to be healed? Elijah says, you got to go wash in the Jordan River. And he's like, no way, I'm not going to do that. That's too easy. And the servant says to him, hey, if he asked you to do something harder, you would have done it. I mean, there's something about the human heart that hates the simplicity of a crucified Messiah who paid it all. I want to contribute. And that's Catholicism all day long. And so I think that, to answer your question, you don't escape from that unscathed. The reformers, the Italian reformers, if they didn't leave, so we're thinking 16th century, because that's the big boom, right? We've got Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, others. If you didn't leave Italy, then you got killed. Snuffed out. There's valleys where, remember we're talking about Waldensians? Thousands in one blow are murdered for the sake of the gospel. Wiped out. Then what you have that remains is sadly just a small spark of Christianity. And that it's had to basically, in some ways, I would say, compromise to stay alive. Not all. There's some great happy exceptions. There's some great churches, but very few. I think that's it. If we had one more quick one, we could do it.
My question.
All right.
I'm glad that you explained about the life in Italy as a pastor, as a missionary. And my question to you is, what were your expectations going over there? To teach from the pulpit most of the time, and kind of the idea of being a shepherd, a pastor, or you knew about all of these creative things that you had to do to send the gospel out?
I think from the beginning, I knew that I was longing to do pastoral ministry, because I think that what Italy needs is churches. I mean, the Great Commission is church planting work. So Jesus doesn't just say, go to all the nations and share the gospel with them. He says, go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded you, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and lo, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. He's with us to enable us to do all of those things. I think you're teaching on this this week. Okay? He's going to fill it all out for you. But the point is, all of those things happen in the context of the local church. So I knew from the beginning that I want to do evangelism, want to do these other things, but I knew that it was going to be a local church ministry. And until there's other pastors, Massimo and I will be the pastors. And we long to see other Italians raised up, but that's that was my expectation. So I think I'm doing exactly what I was hoping the Lord would let me do. Call that good? Anything else? Can I pray? That'd be allowed? Okay. Guys, thank you for listening. Let's thank the Lord. Father, I look out and see these dear saints, these dear brothers and sisters, and I know that each one of them, if they're in Christ, that means that you've given them gifts, you've given them talents and burdens, and I pray that you would encourage each heart in this room this evening. Maybe they'll never go to Italy. Maybe they'll never leave Broward County. But whatever they do, wherever they go, Father, I pray that they would be peacemakers in the truest sense, that they would bring the gospel of peace, that they might point others to Jesus Christ as the one in whom we can be justified. Father, I pray that they would take great courage, knowing that we have a God, we serve you, and you justify the ungodly. Our gospel is not change yourself and you can be saved. Our gospel is come as you are and throw your feet throw yourself at the foot of the cross, repent and believe upon Christ, and life is yours not because you merited it, but because Christ did. So I pray that you would encourage them in their love for the gospel. I'm so grateful for Matt and for Brian and for Quentin and all the others that lead in the church. I pray that you would bless them. I pray that their hearts would be filled with the Spirit. They would walk in a manner worthy of the gospel, and that their love for Jesus Christ would overflow into the life of every saint that makes up this church. I pray that when we come back in a few years, that the church would be filled with even other new faces, and that the congregation would grow in love one for the other, and that their testimony would be faithful. I pray little by little, even those who live around the church or who live in the area would hear testimonies of what you've done here, and that you would save others. Lord, make these people, even as I pray for myself, useful sowers of the gospel. You don't need us, but you use us So I thank you for this church. In Jesus' name, amen.